Hello everyone, for this tutorial video I'd like to explain more in depth how the modeling function in Blender works. Unlike the layout options, there are actually two separate menus, each having their own unique tool list. When you work with the details of how the model actually works, which is what I'll explain more later in the video. In particular, you will see a menu on the left hand side just like in layout, and in fact, the first few options are the same exact as in the layout menu, with no changes to their functionality whatsoever. But you will see beneath the Add Cube option is a list of tools that were not in the layout menu, which is what I would like to focus on in this video. In particular, the first option, Extrude, simply means to stretch out based on a selection you make, like so. Note that it also has sub-options when you click on it, as indicated by the small arrow. The first one, Extrude Region, allows you to extrude normally or freely, so it will stretch out the entire region you select. The next one, Extrude Manifold, is very similar, except the difference is that it will dissolve the edges whose faces form a flat surface and intersect old edges. So it is sort of like an extrude and clean up at the same time. The next one, Extrude Along Normals, is a little more complicated to understand, but simply extrudes the face along the normals, which means along the faces of the shape. Next one, Extrude Individual, extrudes the individual faces separate from each other, like so. The final option, Extrude to Cursor, extrudes the shape in the direction pointing toward the cursor. Although, like with any tool, it all depends on your personal preference and what you are comfortable with. I believe Extrude Individual Faces or Extrude Region the plain way are the best, because they allow you to control the extrusions with high precision, rather than letting the computer try to calculate it for you. The next option is Inset Faces, which simply sets a face inside the existing face. So sort of like how to make a ring, you would inset a circle inside a larger circle. The next option, Bevel, is more complicated and unintuitive, but what it's supposed to do is cut in all the edges or vertices, depending on what you select, at an angle to create a sort of rounded rectangle look, like so. The next option does have a drop-down menu with subtypes, but I would use only the first one, as the second one is very unintuitive and difficult to use. In particular, the first option on it is called Loop Cut, and simply allows you to slice it in a cookie cutter way, like so. This is useful for making new edges and making smaller sections inside bigger objects. The next two tools I will skip entirely for similar reasons, They are very unintuitive and more complicated to use than is useful. The next option, spin, is like a sort of special type of extrusion where you simply revolve the selection in a circle around the cursor like so. There is also a second subtype called spin duplicates, which simply makes the extrusions as separate copies instead of stretched out from the original version. The next option, smooth/randomize, is pretty simple, but I wouldn't advocate for using it as it does the same thing as moving the vertices manually would do. The next option is edge slide and vertex slide as a subtype, which simply allows you to slide an edge or vertex once you select it like so. The next option, shrink fatten, doesn't seem to do anything useful that scale doesn't already do, so I will skip it. And the last two options I will not teach for the same reason, i.e. they are either more complicated than is useful, or do things that are already done by previous tools. As mentioned in the beginning of the tutorial, I am not finished teaching all of the modeling tools yet, however. As you will see a list of tabs here, and I'd like to focus on vertex, edge, and face, which are the tools that allow you to customize the vertices, edges, and faces of the shape respectively. I'd like to focus on vertex first, as it is the most simplest part of the 3D object. When you click on the vertex tab, you will see this, which is simply a handy list of all the tools used to customize the vertices to your liking. There's the traditional extrude and bevel options gone over earlier, but there's also new options that you did not see in the other menu, such as making a new edge or face from the vertices, or creating an edge by connecting vertices either along a path or pair. There is also the rip, slide, and smooth options from the menu shown earlier, as well as options pertaining to data that is not relevant to modeling, so I will skip those for now, such as what group the vertices belong in. When you click on Edge, you will see this drop-down menu, with the extrude and bevel focusing on edges only, but there are also new options, such as bridge edge loops together, make a screw shape by extruding the edges, subdivide the edges, which means split it into groups of smaller edges, subdivide edge ring, which I believe is more complicated than subdivide, so I do not use it, because subdivide does all the things I need for it already. Unsubdivide, which undoes any subdivisions. Rotate the edge either clockwise or counterclockwise. Edge slide, or loop cut and slide at the same time, as well as a complicated offset edge slide, which I mentioned earlier is not as useful as a normal edge slide. And then finally, a list of tools that are again not relevant to modeling, so I will skip those for now, although some will be important later which I will demonstrate explicitly. The final menu for the face-specific tools has the extrusions per usual, as well as inset faces, which I showed you in the menu earlier. Poke faces, which means split the face into a fan shape. Triangulate faces, which means convert the face into a triangle type shape. Convert triangles into quadrilaterals. Solidify the face, which is a fancy type of extrusion. Create a solid wireframe from the selected faces. Fill the edge loop with faces. Fill a grid from 2 loops. Beautify the faces, which I would not recommend, as I believe you should do almost everything manually in order to make it precise. Cut an intersection, or cut solid geometry. Weld the edges into faces. And finally, things that are not relevant to modeling, but cover other types of data for the face, such as shading, which I will explain later. Now that I've explained all of the relevant tools for modeling the object or arranging the particular details of how it works, I can go over sculpting next. See you then.